to make the introduction for Stanley Meyer this evening, for this evening's workshop. Stanley Meyer is a businessman and a freelance inventor and lives in Grove City, Ohio. His scientific and engineering background covers many fields of endeavors, including heart monitors for the medical profession, the validator system for the banking institutions, the NEVEX and ACTAR system for the oceanography field, and the EBIT concept for Star Wars, to mention a few. And now, Mr. Meyer has developed a water fuel cell technology to help solve the energy crisis. Many energy patents have been granted to him over the years, and Stanley, to name a few of these patents, has founded and served as chairman of several high technology businesses and co-sponsored other business activities in the international marketplace. While continuing to set up the water fuel cell business and inventing, Mr. Meyer has begun working on a book entitled With the Lord There is Purpose, describing his spacewalk with the Lord to fulfill end-time prophecy. He continues his speaking engagements throughout the world, and he is also the recipient of 4 awards of merit, including from Who's Who of American Inventors in 1990 and 1992, Who's Who of Entrepreneurs USA in 1991 and 1992, and Who's Who of American Inventors of the Year in 1993. He has authored several international publications and has been a requested speaker for a number of organizations, including the 1989 Safe International Congress for Free Energy in Einsiedeln, Switzerland, the 1990 International Extraordinary Science in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the 1991 International Global Clean Energy Congress in Geneva, Switzerland, and the 1991 International Global Science Congress in Dayton Beach, Florida. And now I'd like to introduce you to Stanley.
As I had mentioned a little earlier, for those on the videotape, we do release several publications pertaining to the water fuel cell technology. One happens to be the Birth of New Technologies, you see right here, which covers a detailed step-by-step explanation on why and how we can use water as a fuel source. Not only explaining the hydrogen fraction technology, it goes into the electrical polarization process and takes it right into the atomic energy balance of water, and how that we can use ordinary natural water as a fuel source to power our cars, heat our homes, and even fly our aircraft, and to go even into deep stellar space. So if you're interested in it, the publications are available for around $20 a piece in the conference, and $25 on a mailing request to cover the printing cost. The second manual that we released is also, we call the Water Fuel Cell Dealership Sales Manual. This is an overview of the technology and also covers our business format on how we are actually bringing this technology in, not only into this country, but internationally. But for the same problems that we're confronting in energy in this country is also being confronted in other countries. So we've set up an international way of decentralizing both the production and the installation of this type of technology in order to get into the international market area. We also release periodically news releases. If those of you are interested, kindly give us your name and address or send a mailing request to us, and we will more than happily to send you an update on the detailed step-by-step of the development of the technology and what's occurring in the international market area. This will continue on. We will put you on our computer system and send these mailers to you if you are interested. Again, for those mailing requests, just send us a letter and we'd be more than happy to send it to you. For those who would request the Birth of New Technology or the WFC Dealership Sales Manual, all you would need to do is to send us a check on a U.S. bank and for the requested materials, and we would be more than happy to send it to you. We also release a videotape. It's an hour presentation covering a lot of this technology. It's called the Extraordinary Science Talk. We released that videotape for $25 too, if you're interested, and just simply send us a request. for that material.
A car that runs on water instead of gasoline. Can it be true? Or inventor Stanley Meyer made an announcement today in Colorado Springs. He says he's come up with a device that will hook up to any engine and allow it to run on good old H2O. Mr. King's heard off tonight on the possible impact of the water fuel cell.
Next, Stanley Meyer says the answer to dependence on foreign oil lies all around us. Seawater, tap water, and rainwater. Any kind of H2O, he says, can power just about every type of engine. How? With the water fuel cell. It fits in the palm of his hand, but it could revolutionize the world.
You're talking about a pollution-free, totally new source of energy, the voltage disassociation of water.
The fuel cell converts water into a gas, hydrogen oxygen, which is released in the form of thermo-explosive energy.
So the water fuel injector simply replaces the spark plug. We hook it to a hydrogen computer system which regulates and meters the flow going into the injector. It processes the water in such a way to release its thermo-explosive energy. And
the tubular array exciters or voltage zones are immersed in natural water, forming the water fuel cell. Once energized, the gases are quickly generated on demand, releasing energy in the form of hydrogen gas that is 2.5 times more powerful than gasoline. Once the fuel cell meets the energy demand, switch off the voltage zone, terminating the gas. You are now with, in its real scientific terminology, the ability of burning ordinary water under controlled means. The temperature produced exceeds 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The quenching circuit prevents anti-spark back while hydrogen gas is rendered safer than natural gas. Increased voltage on demand increases flame size, increases BTU capacity. The heat energy shown is 2.5 times greater than that of gasoline and burns 3 times faster. Because of this, the gas energy can now be used to run your car on water.
Let's get back on land to top our news here at 6 o'clock. An age-old dream becoming a reality. A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
Water has always been considered a precious commodity, but Stan Meyer's invention may make it even more valuable. He has developed what's called a water fuel cell. It has taken the place of his old gas tank. The water fuel cell breaks down water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is used to run his dune buggy.
I don't care if you use rainwater, well water, city water, ocean water. If you don't have any fresh water, go ahead and use snow.
If you don't have any snow available to you, they use salt water because there's no adverse effect to the fuel cell.
Meyer started working on this project 4 years ago. He's not a scientist. He isn't even a chemist. In fact, he never graduated from college. Myers was determined, he says, to design something to protect this country from oil embargoes.
And we have calculated that if we take the dune buggy from Los Angeles to New York, we would roughly use 22 gallons of water.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Meyer's invention. There is talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run Army tanks. Myers is currently perfecting a water fuel cell for cars. It will cost about $1,500. He says it won't need any maintenance and you won't have to replace it. It'll be at least 2 years before the fuel system goes into mass production. The day it happens will be one the fuel industry hates, but it'll put a smile on the face of those who've had to say at one time or another, fill her up. I'm Ralph Robin.
Now let's go ahead and discuss a little bit how and why that we're doing it and how we can use water as a fuel source. You have to kind of apologize. There are those who have followed me over the years. If you have not processed patents or in the processing of processing patents, you must become aware of there are many loopholes in the patent processing, both nationally and internationally on the PCT Treaty Act. When you start to develop this type of technology, you are subject to be in compliance with the PCT Treaty Act, as well as under the national security laws. If you can run a car down the road on water, you can also run a tank down the road on water. We're reaching a point that is perhaps following a very critical state that we're going to be facing in the areas of another energy crisis of which we will not be able to respond unless this type of technology will be able to go forward. Go ahead, Leonard. You will. I want you to go home and I want you to look in the Bible. Technology to use water as a fuel source is prophesied in the scriptures. Look in the King James Version of the Bible. Look up Job 38, verse 22 and 23. When the era through the embargo in the United States, I was very actively engaged retailing truck parts, making over $1 million a year. Actually $20 million across the board. When the era through the embargo in the United States, it alarmed me that a little country over the Mideast could actually cripple the United States. As mentioned, my background is quite diversified in research development, product development, engineering, corporate entrepreneuring, starting corporations right on the ground floor, right on up into the multi-international areas. So the Lord has really prepared me well over 20 years to be doing what I'm doing. Now in the scriptures where the Lord was talking to Job and he asked him a question, he said, hey Job, have you ever considered the treasures of snow? Or have you considered the treasures of hell, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against battle and war? Now, is there anyone in here that thinks that you will not encounter a great deal of difficulty in trying to bring this type of technology in? I've been bringing it in under the power and authority of the Word of God. I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. I exercise all the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and I've been bringing it under the power and authority of the Word of God. And many people ask me how in the world that we're able to do this. And of course, this is my witness and my testimony before the world. Because to those in the know of how to control and manipulate high technology, I've been affiliated in a high-tech area all of my life. I know how the multi-international works to control and maintain that technology and to manipulate it. When I started back during the era of embargo, it became very apparent that in order to bring the technology in, I had to comply to certain design requirements. Number one, it had to be built in the garage. If the technology could be developed in the garage, then I could bypass all the exotic manufacturing technology that control you or manipulate you. In other words, if the scientists would invent a chemical to increase the efficiency of the solar cell, but if Exxon or Atlantic Richfield would have, or let's say Exxon would have control of a wafer, then in fact that technology could be blocked going into the marketplace. So by building and developing the technology in the garage environment, then I have the abilities to bypass that type of control that they be put upon you. It's not only in the process of running the car and demonstrating the fact that we use the water fuel source, it has to be demonstrated in a way that is legally protected, not only for this country, but for that of other countries. When we started to file the patents on the processing of the technology, demonstrated under 35 U.S. Code 101, if some of you may know, it says demonstrate operability. We went opposite the electrolysis process. I will assure you the United States government was no longer going to issue the patents unless we can demonstrate to them fully the operation, the mode of operability of the technology. And whenever you file patents, never file patents on over unity, you will never get them. File your patents on the mode of operability for those of you who seek to develop high technology. Always go for mode of operability and never go for over unity. If you do, you'll never receive your patents, but you can obtain your patents on the mode of operability. So the Lord started dealing with me. I went in my office laboratory. I did an analysis of why we had an energy problem based on my scientific background, and I said a simple prayer. I said, God, I love my country. It's the greatest country in the world. For you see, I've been all over the world, and I know and I value America. I said, I love my country. It's the greatest country in the world. If you help me put a power supply in the country, then I'll do anything you want me to do. For you see, I know the controls and all the various loopholes of manipulation to control high technology, and it was going to take the faith directed unto the Lord in order to accomplish it, or otherwise it would never be done. When I did an analysis as to the energy problem, I realized that something happened in this country, that even the experts never anticipated. And what took place was that the oil pressure in our existing field started dropping. So much, in fact, that we started importing around 5% of foreign oil in around 65. In an interim period of 10 years, we went up to 40% of dependency on foreign oil, and this is where the President of the United States said that we must come up with an alternate energy source if our economic base was to survive. We have not reversed that dependency. We're now well over 63% of dependency on foreign oil in order to maintain the industrial base of this country. Now, it's not a question if or when that oil is going to be cut off. There are many governmental agencies, this country and other countries that verify that the pressure is dropping in the airfields just exactly as they have been dropping in the U.S. fields, but they're dropping 3 times faster than occurred in the United States. You cannot continue to bring the oil out and expect it's going to be there forever. We know we have roughly about 8 years of supply of oil coming out of the Mideast in order to maintain the industrial base. Now, you and I are all in the same boat. If you look at our industrial base and the world industrial base, it's based on the supply and utilization of energy. Is that not so? If you can't get energy to farmers, can they till their lands, sow their crops, and harvest them? I was pulled in a closed-door meeting in Columbus, Ohio, when the Columbia gas system informed the industrial leaders of the state of Ohio that our gas was being cut off 100%. I saw some of the richest and most powerful men and industrial leaders in the state of Ohio popping pills, and I thought they were going to have heart attacks. Because what they told us was that without any gas or any energy, we cannot make a product, right? And if you can't make a product, can you make profit? And if you can't make profit, do you pay your bills? The bigger you are, the harder you fall. And we were importing well over 95% of natural gas into the state of Ohio. I also started making some calls, and I started to realize that if our trucks were not started in moving goods and services outside the Columbus, Ohio area, I started calling and asking questions. How long do we have before the food supply chain in the United States would be disrupted? And they said, Stan, you have less than 27 days. If you don't get the trucks operational within that interim period of time, the food supply chain in the United States will be disrupted. The food supply chain internationally is less than 27 days. So it became very imperative that without a new and a free and abundant energy source, if we had no ability to retrofit directly to the industrial base of this country, even in the international areas, then we were going to be confronted with a tremendous catastrophic event that, in fact, without any form of retrofit energy system, we would not be able to maintain our industrial base, and it will come down to survival, whether or not we have the ability to supply the food for you and I to eat. Now, if we have no energy, can you go to the store to buy the food? Do you starve? If you have no energy to process the food, are you in the same boat? So it becomes a survival. So I started in during the era of embargo with the prayer unto the Lord. It was illogical to me, and said, Lord, if you will put those patents on my wall. Now, I've suffered from that prayer because that was a prayer of disbelief. I should have said, Lord, you're the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and you will supply me those patents to develop the legal base for bringing it in. And I said, Lord, if you will put those patents on my wall, I'll believe you're Lord, Lord, and King of Kings. Today I can stand before you. I own and control this technology, both nationally, internationally, and nobody owns me or controls me or manipulates me. And as a scientist, as an engineer, as a businessman, that's a miracle to me. And today I can tell you that we have the abilities to bring this type of technology in. And just the same as President Reagan took the executive order to try to ensure that this type of technology would not only be protected to the United States, but also for the world. When I was escorted into the patent office, or to the Pentagon, with several colonels on either side of me, when they realized what I was presenting or developing the technology, I asked the same two questions. Gentlemen, if you don't have an economy, you don't have a government. If you don't have a government, you will not have a military. It's imperative to get this type of technology into the marketplace as well as the other ones. Gentlemen, what happens if a foreign power can come in your own land, use your own existing laws to block this type of technology from coming in? These exactly two questions I asked every leader, every industrial leader of every country of the world that I've been going to, negotiating and talking and relating this type of technology to them in order to try to head off a possible international crisis in energy, which will be insurmountable. Not only that, we talked about the environmental pollution problem. I do not tell you that the internal combustion engine is a processor that processes our air that we breathe. The liberated oxygen that goes into that engine is now covalently linking up with the pollutants going out. That means that we do not no longer have a liberated oxygen to breathe. Those covalent bonding of pollutants coming out of that engine is now covalently linking up with the ionosphere. And as it's covalently linking up, if you want to prove it out, look at the sunset at night, and you will see that our air is starting to turn a brownish color. And that brownish color is showing where those fossil fuel pollutants are interlocking with our ionosphere, interacting with the sun, and as a result of this, we are now converting the atmosphere into a heavy substance that will not support life. Our core samples on the polar regions have shown that well over that the oxygen content in the air was around 30%. Today it's less than 21%. Population 5.4 billion today. In 10 to 14 years will go up to around 9 billion at the rate that we are now processing the ambient air. The oxygen content will drop down to less than 17%. At that particular time we'll be on respirators. The technology being developed was not only to eliminate the pollution, the fossil fuel pollution, and run it off of water, but also be able to process the air in such a way that we can revitalize the energy levels of the atmosphere to take it back to the original position prior to the Industrial Revolution. Now, we've been doing and developing this technology in a way as a retrofit energy system. In other words, what good is it to put it in the home heating if you have no fuel source to be able to run the trucks and operate the automobiles? What good is it if you don't have an energy source that you cannot put into industry and maintain the industrial base? What good is it, for example, if you cannot be able to maintain aviation? You know, during the Arab embargo, we also was confronted with another problem. The problem being is that at that particular time, the United States government had only 2.5 days of aviation fuel for global defense. Today it's down to a day and a quarter. When it reaches a day supply, the Joint Chiefs of Staff will have to make the decision, no more global defense. Any of you ever hear anything about the war brokers? If you want to study about history of World War I and World War II, you'll start to realize that there were men spatially trained and women trained in order to bring countries into war, to break their economic back, to take over the controls of their countries. You ever hear of the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission? You ever hear about the Council, the Group of 300? You hear about the internationalists that are controlling to bring in a one world government. Now we're heading for a one world government, but unfortunately, if the one world government is headed under a control, is controlled by a Mussolini or a Hitler or a person filled with a demonic spirit, we're in one heck of a problem. If that democratic society of the world government would be a representative of each country in the world, then in fact we could be able to stabilize as people upon the earth. The attitude that the multi-internationalists is to come up with zero growth, industrial growth, zero population growth. When I was making a presentation in Geneva to 52 nations there, I was blocked in presenting this technology, not because of the viability of the technology, because the international attitude is they do not want industrial growth to be maintained. There is a move to try to force the countries to accept that they would sign over their natural resource rights. That if you sign over your natural resource rights, you have taken over the countries without even firing a shot. This is to help bring in a one world government. The number one thing that will diffuse the entire episode and be able to maintain us is to bring an alternate energy source in that we can be able to sustain and maintain not only the industrial base of this country but of the world. And therefore I will share this information with you. And once I share it with you, then you have a responsibility. I'm sharing a responsibility to you so great. Now the power structures to be, we all hear about the guys that invent the carburetors that go 200 miles per hour and what have you, and they never get out of the market area. We talk about high energy systems, development of high technology, and they never seem to get out into the marketplace. Why is that? You know, and Rockefeller was a very smart man to get our economies to operate on fossil fuel. He got a hold of a think tank. And in the think tank, he says, I want you to come up with motivating thoughts that would demotivate the people in order to bring us up on the fossil fuels. You see, at that time, we're talking about high energy research and development, are we not? And yet Rockefeller wanted to convince the population of the world that we need fossil fuel to maintain the economies, and therefore suppress and prevent alternate energy sources to come forward. And so in this think tank, he came up with such phraseologies. Well, you can always lead a horse to water, but you can't get him to drink. Any of you have ever said that? You know, if you say that out of your mouth, you know that you believe it. It's the greatest lie in the world. If you lead a horse to water and he doesn't want to drink, I'll assure you that if you stake him about 4 feet away from the water in 2 days flat, he'll try to break the rope to get to the water. If you want to speed up the process, feed him some salt. Another great demotivating thought. Well, you can't buck City Hall. How about another demotivating thought? 2 things you never discuss is politics and religion. Do you know why in the news medias that you are bombarded with tremendous negativism? Because they had found out the physical, psychological makeup of the individual is such that if you receive so much negativism, you turn it off. Do you know that if our forefathers and our grandfathers would awaken out of their graves and see what's taking place in our country today, do you know what happened? They would grab their arms and go to Washington, D.C. and clean out our government. Absolutely. The negativism that's presenting to you is the process of desensitizing you to allow such atrocities to take over. And if you don't think that there are people in the world that do not want America to stand, you know why? Because the Constitution in the United States, the Bill of Rights, says as free people we have ability to enjoy certain inalienable rights that was given to us by God. And unfortunately there are some people who does not want us to continue to enjoy the freedom that our forefathers fought. And when I turned and said, I will do this, Lord, it had to be by faith. Because I was given a great gift. That gift was to be raised under freedom. Now let's see how we can use water as fuel. Because the greatest thing that all political leaders fear, that you and I would come together in one accord. That if you and I would come together in one accord, no political system in the world, no multi-internationalist groups could defeat you. Look what happened to Russia after 70 years. They said, so we no longer want communism. We're tired of the KGB killing our people, torturing our people. And they said, enough is enough. And that's why you receive the negativism. That's why in these conferences that they will try to promote and try to tell you that you have not the power or say-so in our government. And I want to tell you that under the Constitution of the United States, read it. For it gives us the ultimate power to be able to determine the destiny and the strength of our country. And how I'm bringing this technology in, it can't come through the multi-international structures. If I would sign over this technology to General Electric or Westinghouse, then we'd be taken over within 24 hours. If you think you got political pressures in the United States government, try to negotiate with the military. For their political pressures is great, and they cry out. And you know, when the Arabs came to me and offered me $1 billion, cold cash, simply to stop on the technology, and when I said no, I will not do this. And he said, you will be stopped. And I said, why is that? He said, because the apathy of the American people is such that they will not come behind you. And for a long time, that statement stood out. But I will assure you, today, not only in the United States, but in the world, that they're coming together in one accord and say it's enough. Because if we do not reverse this, I've recently come back from Sweden. Their entire forests are dying. Why? Because the pollutants that's going in the air, covalently linking up with the ionosphere, is decreasing the light intensity coming into this atmosphere. And as a result of this decrease in light intensity, bacteria is now allowed to grow, which is now causing blight, which is now starting to kill our trees. Go over and look in the Black Forest, that even the trees and their roots are dying. We are on a planet, which is our spaceship, and if we do not reverse, if we do not come together in one accord, then I would say, gentlemen, that we will not survive. Now, when we show this technology, you must now make the decision whether or not you come together in one accord and try, and we can do it, to come together to keep this country strong, as well as to protect it. And when President Reagan was advised of this technology, he turned against the multi-internationalists and said, do not block or do not allow this technology to go forward. And he wrote the executive action to ensure that this technology would not only be protected for the United States, but also to be protected for the world. And it's amazing to me that we have the abilities that we can proceed on. Go ahead. The first thing, and always been the first objective, and always will be the first objective in developing the technology, you must legalize it first and then bring it in. Many inventors blow their ego, they get to their Achilles heel to try to obtain the information, not for the benefit of you and I, but it's the benefit of control or manipulation or suppression of that technology. So when you develop your high technology, you do everything possible. The prime objective is to legalize the technology. When you receive that gold seal and that little red ribbon, it says that you have complied with the laws of the land. Is it not so? It's not what Stan Meyer says. It's what is now been legalized. And if there's any question of operability of the technology, under the law, what do they have? They'll pull you under U.S. Code 35 U.S. Code 101 and show operability. And when we showed operability of this technology, then it became a great concernment to protect this technology for all the countries as well as the United States. So as I move, there are many people who have seeked to try to cause me to stumble, have tried to seek to suppress me, has tried to seek in many ways, but the Lord has always allowed that we can proceed on with the technology. As we're legalizing the technology, I'm subject to the national security laws of this country. I'm also subject to the national security laws of other countries under the PCT Treaty Act. Other countries who now are informed of this type of technology is requesting that this technology would also be protected for their countries. For you see, if this type of technology is restricted from those other countries, then their entire economic base could collapse. You know, if you can use water as a fuel source to maintain an industrial base of one country, but if it's blocked in another, you can drop the prices on your goods and commodities, and therefore the other country cannot be able to sustain itself. Unfortunately, there are those who seek the power controlled by greed, right? And seems to have the desire to control man under greed. It's a form of a sickness. And unfortunately, in my many battles, we've had to overcome this type in order to bring this technology out. So you'll have to forgive me for those who feel that I should have brought the technology out further. I had to be in compliance with both the U.S. and the national security laws and the PCT Treaty Act in order to get around the loopholes that are set there not for you and I, but set there to control and manipulate the high technology. And so, if you never violate that prime directive, you can bring it in. Go ahead. Water is fuel. You know, how many of you here today have driven a car here? Any of you driven cars at all? Do you realize that when you're driving on gasoline, do you know that you're running on a hydrogen? You know that if you look at the chemical equation of gasoline, you will find out the hydrogen atom is attached to the carbon atom. Is not so? And basically, in the highest octane of gasoline, you have roughly about a half a pound of hydrogen to it. Now, water, on the other hand, is 2 to 1. 2 hydrogen atoms to 1 oxygen atom. Is it not so? How many pounds of hydrogen do we have in water? You find out by the atomic weight is around 1.7 pounds of hydrogen in water. I had the most scientific compilation study on hydrogen that's ever come out of the scientific world from NASA. Did we not propel the Columbia spaceship by hydrogen and oxygen? And in that report, it clearly stipulated that hydrogen was the most ideal fuel of the future. It can be utilized anywhere, solve even the environmental pollution problem, but they did not have an answer in 3 areas. 1, to produce the hydrogen gas or release it economically from water, control the rate of production, be able to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen gas to co-equal fossil fuels, and add the 4th one, be able to transport it without spark ignition. And I will all patronize both nationally and internationally on this type of technology, to be able to use water as a fuel source. Go ahead. Now, in order to solve the problem as a scientist, you got to learn to ask the right question. This particular quest was, how in the world can you switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule and do it economically? You know, Einstein said even that there was enough energy in a gallon of water that if you knew how to release it, it could take the power of a 1,000-car train around the earth many, many, many times. Now, when you do your research and development work, don't go back and try to reinvent the same thing that's been being reinvented over and over and over again. To solve a problem, an energy problem, you must go in a different direction. And in this direction, we had to find a way to simply switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule and not process the water molecule in any way. In order to understand this, then, we went back, and the Lord was showing me, said, okay, what happens in the law of physics? That for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? Okay, so when the unlike atoms of the hydrogen atoms covalently link up to the oxygen, normally the oxygen atom has 8 protons and 8 electrons, does it not? But when the oxygen atom now accepts the negative charge electron of the hydrogen atom, now what happens? There's an electrical imbalance that occurs because you still have 8 protons, but you now have a total of 10 electrons, do you not? And under the law of physics says that the first orbit will, the L orbit or K orbit, can maintain up to 2 electrons, isn't that so? But in the next orbit, the L orbit, says to reach stable state to form the water molecule, you can have up to 8 electrons, isn't that so? Now after 8 electrons is now accepted in the L orbit, now the water molecule goes into stable state. But since the hydrogen atom now is sharing its negative charged electron, then the positive charged proton swings the hydrogen atom to a positive electrical charge. Oh boy, Lord. Now what can prove that out? Well, if you put a cup of water in a microwave oven and you send a microwave through the water, does it not heat up the water molecule? And how does the water molecule become agitated? Because the microwave produces a positive and negative potential, which now oscillates the water molecule, because the water molecule takes on opposite electrical charges. Now, when this negative electrical charge is now formed, that negative charge is now formed equivalent to the 2 shared negative electrons, isn't that so? That under the law of physics, that for every action there's a equal and opposite reaction. As a result, now we're setting up an opposite electrical charge, Q and Q prime. Now the next question is asked, is there an electromagnetic field that exists between the oxygen and the hydrogen atom? And the answer is no. For you see, when the oxygen atom accepts the negative charge electron of the hydrogen atom, these electrons pair together, and as a result, cancels out the electromagnetic field, and the oxygen atom does not take on an electromagnetic charge. Oh boy, Lord, this is getting good. And it became very obvious then that all I had to do was go opposite opposite to the electrolysis process. Shut off the flow of amps and expose the water molecule to a high pulse voltage field. Go ahead. Now we know under Coulomb's law of electrical force and under Newton's second law of electrical force, does not voltage perform work? It is not unknown in physics that voltage absolutely performs work. Is that not the sum basis of electronic circuit design? When you turn on the TV set here, you not attenuate the grid, the positive voltage behind the grid, that as you attenuate the voltage, you accelerate the negative charge electron, striking the fluorescent screen, which now produces a greater light intensity. We know, in fact, that voltage does absolutely perform work. Under Coulomb's law and Newton's second law of electrical force and electronic circuit, would not the positive voltage of this voltage field, if you restrict amps, would it not attract the negative charge electron? Have you ever heard in physics that opposite charges will what? Attract, right? How about like charges? Would not now the negative voltage field here repel that negative charge electron? Absolutely. You know, when we went into the patent office under 35 U.S. Code 101, showed it to the examiner chief, the experts in physics, chemistry, and electronics, and they realized it was a cold process, they asked the infamous question, why in the world did no one ever think about this? I said, well, you want me to give you an answer? I said, number one, I said, the knowledge of water will come out of time in great trouble. But the reason why Faraday did not discover the electrical polarization process, you see, he needed modern day inventions. He needed the modern day invention of stainless steel 304 material, which forms the voltage zones, which is chemically inert to the process. It does not chemically react to liberated hydrogen and oxygen atoms. You see, he didn't have stainless steel back in those days. The second thing he didn't have the prior knowledge that the water molecule takes on opposite electrical charges. And he didn't have modern electronic circuit design to restrict amps and allow voltage to take over in a dead short condition. He worked with a very crude battery. When he put the electrolyte into the water, it created a dead short condition, and amp flow resolved, and there was no way to restrict the amps because it was dead short. It was a dead short condition. So you see, when you look at modern day inventions, look and see the technology, how and why you can use that advancement of technology for the betterment of mankind. Go ahead. Now it became quite obvious that all I had to do is to restrict the amps and expose the water molecule to opposite voltage zone. Would not the negative charge oxygen atom now be attracted to the positive voltage zone? Under the law of physics, opposite charges will what? Attract, right? Would not the positive charge hydrogen atom now be attracting to the negative voltage zone? And therefore you're overcoming the electrical attraction force of the water molecule. You're now causing the water molecule to expand. You're changing the time share rate of the electron, and you're switching off the covalent bonding of the water molecule, and now you're releasing the hydrogen and oxygen atom for ordinary natural water without processing it, without adding any form of chemicals to it. It's a physical process. Why? Because do you consume a voltage field in an electronic circuit? No. Voltage performs a physical process of opposite electrical attraction. Therefore, when you release the hydrogen and oxygen atom, therefore when you release it, you're now processing and using the energy from the hydrogen atom, which is 2.5 times greater than that of gasoline. That's not my figures, that's the National Bureau of Figures, National Bureau of Standards figures. You can go over there and look at their books. You will see that that energy is 2.5 times gasoline. Notice the reference. It's not 2.5 times fingernail polish, and it's not 2.5 times lipstick. It's 2.5 times gasoline. It's a very powerful fuel. Now, since we're now overcoming the electrical attraction force, go ahead. We are also now starting to switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule. So when they tell you it takes a tremendous amount of energy to release something. For an example, I have an electrical magnet here, and I energize electromagnets, and I draw a metal plate up to it that weighed 1 ton. As long as that electromagnet is creating the electromagnetic field to hold
the metal, if you kept on trying to pull that metal, you would never break the field, right? But how much energy does it take to go over there and simply switch off the switch to de-energize the coil? Would not the metal just simply fall apart? So on the covalent switch off, what happens is you're putting electrical stress. Are you not now deflecting that negative charge electron to the positive voltage field? Is that not so in physics? You ever look at gas ionization tubes? Therefore, what happens is you're now translating the electrical stress to the particles inside the nucleus that are arranged in a geometrical configuration. They are now spinning, and as you put the electrical stress onto these component parts inside the nucleus, it now slows down the gyroscopic speed, and under the electromagnetic theory of magnetism says that whenever an electrically charged particle moves through an electrostatic field, what's its byproduct? Anybody know? The electromagnetic energy. So the strength of the electromagnetic energy is directly related to the velocity or the speed of the moving of the electron. Is it not so? So if you will slow down the movement of the speed of the velocity of the electron, if you now slow down the gyroscopic action within the nucleus, you now can weaken the electromagnetic fields of the atoms. Now we know in physics there are 4 forces that affect the atom. What are they? Electrical force, the electromagnetic force, weak and strong nuclear force. What's the number 1 that affects the other 3? Voltage. You attenuate the electrical fields of the atom, you can attenuate the fields of all of the other parts of the atom by voltage. Go ahead. Now how do we do this? We do it in such a way that we don't consume a great deal of power. The Lord had me to develop what we call a VIC coil. And we've taken the voltage zones here and we've now constructed a resonant cavity. Now, is not natural water a dielectric liquid? Sure it is. Since it has 8 electrons in its L orbit, it has a total capacity of 8 electrons in that orbit. It says I don't want any more electrons. I'm not going to exchange electrons. And so the dielectric value of water is around 78.54. Or it poses the movement of electrons 78.54 times greater than air. Is it not so? So if you don't process the water in any way, utilize and key in on the dielectric properties of water. Now these are very simple answers to a very complex problem. I will assure you, back during the era of embargo, there was not in the books. If they were in the books, I would not have obtained the patents into processing. In order to do this now, when I put the dielectric liquid between 2 electrical plates, what do I form? Electronic guys? Capacitor, do I not? Now, if I hook a coil in series to this capacitor, here and here, what do I have developed? A resonant charging tube, do I not? And therefore now you set up a pulsing where you're now taking like 12 volts and amplifying up to 20,000 volts, and as you pulse this, you now create the magnetic field of the coil, which opposes the movement of the electron. And because of the inductance capacitance of the coil, you're now allowing voltage to be applied across the resonant cavity and restricting ampload by 90 degrees. So therefore, when you adjust the pulse frequency, you're tuning into the dielectric properties of water. Ampload goes down to minimum, and voltage tries to go towards infinity if the electronic components will allow it to occur. Now, the question is, how do you produce electricity? Anybody know? I don't feel bad when I was in electronic engineering. Don't pay attention to the videotape. I asked them many times, Professor, how in the world do you produce electricity? Well, when you move a magnetic field through a coil of wire, it dislodges the electron of the copper atom, the farthest one away, right? And that electron has an electromagnetic field. And as a result of it, the external magnetic field, when it's greater in intensity, then the electron will pluck it out, just like voltage will do so. And as a result, you now have created current flow in one direction, and since the copper atom has a missing electron, it goes to a positive charge to create voltage. And as a result of this, you now use the electromagnetic field of the coil to restrict the amps and allow voltage to take over to perform its work to split the water molecule, which is called the electrical polarization process. Go ahead. In order to do this, we had now to develop the VIC coil. Now, note in the development of the technology, I not only had to develop the technology in the garage, but we had to comply with the KISS method. Anybody know what it is? Keep it simple, stupid, don't make it complicated. It was developed in the eyes of a businessman. What did it have to comply with? It had to comply with the law of economics. There's a lot of Cadillac ideas that come in existence, but they never get out in the marketplace because why? They violate the law of economics. The guy who comes up with the cheapest way is going to win out. That's the bottom line. So when you look at this technology, as a research development engineer, as a product development engineer, you will not hurt my feelings. You can get out and walk out of this meeting anytime you so desire. I would do the same thing. When I look at new technology, if it doesn't comply with the law of economics, it has no value to me because you can't get it out in the marketplace. It cannot become a useful invention. So when I present this technology to you, you must ask the question, does in fact this technological base comply with the law of economics? And if it does, then you will have to concur that we have a way of bringing a new energy system into the economy of the United States and the world and do it very quickly under the retrofit program. In order to do this, your answer, for an example, is that you notice that the resonant coils are wrapped close to the core here. I'm allowing the magnetic field not to only enter into the secondary primary to up its voltage, but I'm also allowing it to go and enter into the resonant coils, which are made of stainless steel 403 F or 403 FR material, which acts as a resistor, but as you apply an external magnetic field to it, and as it's generating its own electromagnetic field through its inductance, capacitance, characteristics of its coil, it now allows us to be able to restrict the amps, allow voltage to take over to perform in a dead short condition. So now, most of the patents up to this date have been issued on the processing. But I will assure you that if you don't go on and design the systems engineering of that system, you can receive a technological blockage. Is it not so? What happens if a foreign power could control the design and development of the VIC coil, even though I had the process on the electrical polarization process? If they control the development of that coil, could I get it in the marketplace? Absolutely not. So it was a requirement that I would go into systems, full systems engineering. Many inventors and developers fail because they don't continue to carry the development of the technology out into the marketplace, and that's why they stumble. And the multinationals or others seek that form of control and know that the inventor many times do not have the emphasis to go forward. Why do I go forward when I meet such great opposition? You know, back during the embargo, I didn't have one white hair on my head. And believe me, I have fought many legal battles to assure that this technology would get in. And I'm sure that I'm going to get a couple more white hairs before it's all over with. Go ahead. We know in electrical power, there's two aspects to electrical power, right? There's amp flow, which consumes electrical power, isn't that so? And then you have voltage. If I were to restrict the amps, what do we have left over? Voltage. Voltage is not consumed in an electronic circuit, therefore it becomes potential energy. Can you use potential energy to perform work? The answer is yes. If my pointer was a metal bar and I permanently magnetize it, would not the magnetic field go from end to end? Now once the magnetic field is formed, is there any more energy going in to maintain that magnetic field? No. Therefore, that becomes potential energy. Could I not take the metal bar, go over, lift the pin off the table, defy the law of gravity, therefore perform work? Absolutely. Therefore, voltage now, as we know in the law of physics, can and does perform work. And heretofore, no one ever dreamed of using opposite electrical voltage being tossed in a sequential mode in order to perform the work to split the water molecule in a simple physical process. Isn't that amazing? Go ahead. Okay, we found out that as you increase voltage amplitude, hydrogen gas is not being produced in a linear function in reference to amp flow, because we're restricting amp flow. It's now being produced in an exponential function. The higher the voltage, the more hydrogen gas is being generated. Now what we're doing is learning certain characteristics now, and we're going to take it in system engineering to a viable retrofit energy system. Go ahead. We're adding laser energy to it, to not only to aid the splitting of the water molecule through the electrical polarization process, but we're going to take it into the hydrogen fracturing technology. to tap into an energy source of immense magnitude capable of not only maintaining the industrial base of our country, but to maintain our military integrity. You know, when I was young, I learned, I was a pacifist, I did not believe in fighting, but I learned a long time ago in this world, you must negotiate from a period of strength. And therefore we must protect the military integrity of the United States. What is it used to build up our economy, and yet we have no way to protect our country. And so therefore it became imperative that we would develop the technology as a retrofit energy system. You see, we also became embarrassed. Not only did we only have 2.5 days of aviation fuel to maintain global defense, are you aware that our sophisticated naval task force out in the Atlantic Ocean stood there for 2.5 weeks with no fuel before the first supply ship came alongside? Are you aware that in fact, since we had no diesel fuel, that our diesel-fired submarines became inoperable? And because of the nuclear modules that are set up in our nuclear fleet, are you aware that in that interperiod of time, that over 60% of our nuclear fleet became inoperable? In my personal opinion, if Russia would have known it at that time, we were very vulnerable, we could have been attacked. We must maintain the military integrity of this country. Go ahead. So now we're starting to raise the voltage amplitude higher, and we get to the point that we're starting now to pluck off the electrons, and we're on, as the water molecule is now being separated in a physical process, changing the time-share rated electron, switching off the covalent bonding, we're now starting to pluck off its electrons, because we want to start to destabilize the combustible gas atoms. Go ahead. Now here we're going into the resonant cavity, and as we raise the voltage, we're plucking the electrons. Now when you pluck the electrons, like from the oxygen atom, does not the oxygen atom take on a positive electrical charge at this point when it's liberated? Do you not have liberated negative charged particles floating around in the water bath? Or are they not now being attenuated and oscillated in the electrical polarization process? So now we are superimposing a physical impact on the electrical polarization process, and we're starting to go into mega yield of hydrogen gas generation that heretofore was never ever dreamed of, and being able to release the hydrogen from water. You remember on the electrolysis process, it's a dead short condition. It will, because of dead short condition, it'll allow voltage potential around 2 volts. So you can't go into resonance, you can't go into atomic resonance because it's a dead short condition. It's only being oscillated by amp flow, not by voltage attenuation. Go ahead. We found out that it works in all forms of natural water, even including the most purest form of distilled water. When we certified all of the waters around the world for the patent office to certify it, we were producing tremendous yields. When we presented it to Artco Steel in the presence of 3 of their physicists and 4 of their chemists, when we said, go ahead and put the most purest form of ionized water in it, when we were producing pounds and pounds of hydrogen gas, which prior said you couldn't do, guess what? They sat down and we had the most interesting conversation for the next hour or so, and say at least they wanted to come in and develop the technology. See, I make a statement, but then I prove it. Now, so far I'm using voltage and shutting off the flow of amps. Does that cost me very much? Am I complying with the law of economics? Secondly, I'm using stainless steel 304 material, which chemically entered to the process. And under actual certification lab testing, the longevity is 0.000, man, Lord, it's getting good, 1 per year. That means the voltage zones are just as good as the day you fired up, going up to 10,000 years. And if any of you guys stay around 10,000 years, you come back and see me. I want to find the answer. But if I don't have to replace the voltage zones, am I still complying with the law of economics? Go ahead. You know, if a brilliant engineer could get an electrolysis process to run down the road, how long would it last? Roughly about 5 or 10 minutes. Electrolysis process is a self-destructing unit. What we're doing now is setting up a totally physical process and allowing voltage to perform the work to split the water molecule. Now we find out some very interesting things. As we attenuated the amplitude in reference to pulse frequency, we hit resonant action. We started supercharging the process. When we hit resonance, we found out that if we shut it off, we allow the resonant action to maintain for 5 seconds, shut it off, we were producing hydrogen gas for 94 seconds. So if you divide 5 seconds into 94 seconds, we're producing hydrogen gas 19 times more in the power output stage than on the input stage. Isn't that amazing? Anywhere along the line, you can re-excite it and go right back into resonant action. We found another very interesting thing. Maybe the power supply is exactly the same when you start to function. Hydrogen gas, it starts and goes in a geometrical progression, continues to increase because of the electrical charge and compounding action of the electrical charges that are being released in the water bath, and it keeps continuing to increase in production rate until you reach the maximum flow rate going into the resonant cavity, which brings on a fifth control, complying with NASA's second major requirement to be able to produce the gas on demand. Go ahead. Oh boy. Now we got a gas that we can release 2.5 times powerful than gasoline. We're doing it economically. Ordinary natural water using stainless steel plates, restricting the atomic voltage to take over. We can attenuate its production. But you know, hydrogen is a very volatile fuel, is it not? We have to come up with a retrofit energy system. We don't have time to come up with new power plants to be able to convert to cars and trucks and planes. We have to maintain the industrial base. You know, Saddam Hussein has access to the viral germ and genetic restructuring. It breeds of the bacteria, air, and water, and oil. He has the Masada complex, that if I'm going to go, we're all going to go. And if he contaminates that oil overnight, every country in the world will have to shut off the flow of oil for fear of contaminating their people and contaminating their country. You know, he's not in love with us. How do we now come up with a retrofit energy system complying with the law of economics, giving us the ability as a retrofit energy system? You have to go through the blue zone. I don't care what type of hydrogen generation system you have, you got to go through Meyer's blue zone to render hydrogen safer than that of natural gas. Well, boy, how are you going to do that? Research outfit out in California spent $2.5 million trying to come up with an engine to run off of hydrogen, and they shut it down using the exotic ceramics. We don't have the materials capable of operating it, and shut it down. But how do we get our trucks moving? How do we get the goods and services to be maintained in our economies? We got to go through the blue zone to render hydrogen safer than natural gas. Go ahead. Here you see a hydrogen flame projecting 7 to 9 inches high. First time in history, you're seeing a hydrogen and oxygen flame being sustained and maintained around 47 centimeters a second. You know, normally when you light hydrogen, what happens to it? It goes, right? It burns around 325 centimeters a second. How is it that after we ignite this, that this flame is being sustained and maintained from ordinary natural water? Go ahead. There's another characteristic of natural water. It's like a sponge. It will absorb ambient air. You know, when I was in my 9th grade science class, I asked the teacher, I said, "Hey, teach, when you light the match, why don't the atmosphere burn up?" I said, "Well, Stan, you know, the atmosphere is composed of non-burnable gases, or non-combustible gases. Gases that will not support the burning process, like nitrogen and argon." I remembered that. And the Lord told me, you know, I was equating and said, "No, I need a ratio of 200 to 1. And the Lord said, "Just go over and light it." I said, "No, Lord, I need a 200 to 1 ratio. He says, "No, go over and light it." And finally, I yielded and went and lit it. And I was sustaining and maintaining it around 47 centimeters a second from ordinary natural water and using water as a gas mixing regulator. You see, not only are we separating the hydrogen and oxygen atoms, but in the world, natural water absorbs between 17 to 19% of ambient air, which the bulk of ambient air is composed of non-combustible gases that do not support the burning process. And as we are now uniformly releasing this gas, it's a multi-gas generator that's automatically taking it and adjusting the burn rate of the hydrogen gas down around 47 centimeters a second. Now, isn't that amazing? Now, if I'm using the water as a gas mixing regulator, does it cost me anything? Hell zippo, right? Go ahead. How much does it cost us for rainwater? Anybody know? You know, I gave testimonies down at the Capitol building and so forth. They were trying to figure out how to tax rainwater. I said, "Well, you guys, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking the wrong guy." Because you see, the old-fashioned rain barrel will come in. All right, now, if NASA would have had this technology, in all probability, the astronauts would have not died. But I was developing the technology, as I mentioned earlier. There was a one stage that I said, either I'll get the car running today. It was late in the day, and I was tired. And I said, either I'm going to get the car running today, or I'm going to blow a hole through this thing. This thing is going to go through the living room floor. And I had no way of anti-spark back device. And to say the least, the living room floor raised up a couple of feet. And I told the Lord I would not develop any technology unless I comply with the federal and state safety code regulations. So in developing this technology, you not only have to comply with the law of economics, but you're going to have to comply with all the safety code regulations. Otherwise, you can't get it in, right? So we found out that when the multi-gas is coming off the water, if you send it through a small little passageway, somewhere along the line, the non-combustible gases separate the hydrogen and oxygen atom. Now, you know, in the law of physics, it's a requirement that the hydrogen and oxygen atom come together, right? But if you keep them separated, can they spark at night? And the answer is no. So therefore, when you mix non-combustible gases with the hydrogen and oxygen gases, you now have a quenching effect, and it's an anti-spark back device, regardless of gas pressure or gas volume. Now, isn't that something? Now, these are simple ideas, but they're very profound ideas. Go ahead. From ordinary natural water, as you see on the flame there, that flame was over 5,000 degrees, melting steel. How are you doing that with natural water? Putting voltage onto it. He says you cannot be done. Remember earlier in the talk I said if you're going to file your patents, you never file patents on over-unity devices. I assure you will never get patents. You file on mode of operability. When they came back and said, Stan, we're calculating this and we're calculating that, and I said, you're not calculating anything because I am filing on mode of operability. And you stop there and say, go. All right. Therefore, we're sustaining it. We developed a quenching circuit for anti-spark back device that happens to be aluminum material. And as aluminum material normally melts around 3,000 degrees, but we have a 5,000 degree flame. How's that? Well, the non-combustible gases now is retarding the speed by which the oxygen and hydrogen comes together. And as a result of that, it now acts as a cooling agent and lifts the hydrogen flame right off the surface. And therefore, it's a cold process. If you see the fuel cell operating, you put your hand on it, it's totally cool because you're not consuming amps in the process. Go ahead. All right, now to demonstrate this, you know, when I was filing the patent office came to me and said, Stan, we know about styrometrics. We know you take the hydrogen and hit a hot plate, put energy in the hot plate to get the energy out of the hydrogen, right? And interact with the air. But notice when we lit that, it sustained and maintained. You no longer had to put any energy in to release the energy coming from the flame. And he said, we don't know what the heck you're talking about adjusting the burn rate of the hydrogen gas. Well, if I explain it to you, do I get my patents? So you got to put it between a hard rock and a hard place. All right, if I had a flash tube here, fill with hydrogen and oxygen and air, if I ignited at one end, you measure it, in 1 second it'll burn 325 centimeters. If I put natural gas in here and mix it with ambient air gases, it'll burn for 42 centimeters in a second. So it became very obvious that if I would take the non-combustible gases and mix it with the hydrogen gas and the oxygen, I now can adjust the burn rate to co-equal that of the fossil fuels. In other words, I'm now using the non-combustible gases to act as a gas modulator that slows down the speed by which the oxygen and hydrogen atom comes together, and as a result, I now can control its burn rate. Now, isn't that amazing? Now, that was the #1 invention, capable as a retrofit energy system, that we now can adjust the burn rate to co-equal the fossil fuels. Go ahead. And right here, now we can adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal gasoline, natural gas, propane, diesel fuel. We can take it all the way down and burn leaves and paper. So when they say you can't do something, in a scientific inquiry, you say, why not? And you start to seek out the answer. Don't allow the negative aspect to come forth to you to demotivate you. Go on, press on. Because somewhere along the line, if you ask the Lord for the information, He's going to give it to you. He says, ask, seek and you shall find, knock and you shall be open, right? So when I asked the Lord, He never showed me a vision. The only thing He would do, it would ask me a question. What happens if you would expose the water molecule to voltage? What would happen if you would mix non-combustible gases with the hydrogen and oxygen? Well, Lord, you're going to adjust the burn rate. Go ahead. That was the #1 invention that gave us the abilities to as a retrofit energy system. All right, we're producing a high temperature flame, as you see there. If we melted the stainless steel pots and pans, our wives would get pretty upset with us, right? Say, oh, hubby, man, you really blew it this time. Look at my pots and pans. How do you lower the temperature from 5,000 degrees down to 200 or 300 degrees? Do it under the law of economics. Well, if you run the gases through the flame, the gases coming off the flame is non-combustible gases, right? Can I capture those gases, recycle it back into the flame, recycle it back in the generator, adjust its cycling rate, and therefore lower the hydrogen burn rate to co-equal the fossil fuels? Now, does it cost me anything to do it above the apparatus? No. Go ahead. How do you run an internal combustion engine? You saw a Volkswagen engine run. How do you do that? As a design engineer, you look at the internal combustion 3 ways. Is it a mechanical drive device? Get us here tonight? Second one is an air pump. Pumps the air in through the carburetor and shuts it out the exhaust. Is it a manufacturer of non-combustible gases? Absolutely. Therefore, you take the non-combustible gas meter, mix it with the water fuel cell, adjust the burn rate to exactly to co-equal the combustion burn rate of gasoline and diesel fuel or LP gas or whatever you're running in an internal combustion engine. Now, since I'm using the ambient air and the non-combustible gases from ambient air, which non-combustible gases are not interacting with the combustion process because the temperatures are not that high. Does it cost them anything? Still complying with the law of economics? Okay, go ahead. Here's another $1 billion patent. The prior art of transporting hydrogen down the road is cryogenics, right? Cool it down to 465 degrees below zero, pressurize it, put it in a pressure tank, put it on a truck, and transport down the road, right? You're spending energy transported down the road, right? Now, can I take the ambient air, expose it to flame to create the non-combustible gases to adjust the burn rate of the hydrogen gas less than or co-equal that of fossil fuels like natural gas? Therefore, I don't even have to change the gas grid system in the United States. Can I take hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of ambient air gases, the non-combustible gases, mix it with the hydrogen and oxygen atom, and be able to now transport it to the conventional gas grid systems without even changing a valve or a pipe? Absolutely. Am I still complying with the law of economics? The key was not only to develop one aspect of the technology, we had to develop it that the technology would move in a bilateral movement throughout the entire economy and make sure that every aspect is totally legalized in order that when we bring it out totally, we will not receive the statutory blockage to bring it in. The greatest disservice that I would see is to bring out and show the technology, the viability of the technology, and some foreign entity is holding up the blocking patents and says, Stan Myers, you cannot bring it into the economy. America, you cannot be able to sustain your industrial base. Stan Myers, you will not be able to aid in helping to keep your country strong. So it became imperative that that legal base would be totally protected at all costs. Go ahead. Now we've gone through and shown a lot of the effective voltage. Remember the alignment going into molecular elongation, changing the time share rate of the electron, we're liquid to gas ionization state. But we're now going down here to the atomic destabilization of the combustible gas atoms. We need to protect the military integrity of the United States and also the industrial base of this country and all the other countries of the world. You know, Einstein said that if you could release this energy from a gallon of water, or from water, that energy is so tremendous that it could power a 1,000-car train around the earth many, 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 many times. How will we do it? Go ahead. And so in development, if you notice that there are many steps in the development of this technology, and we have to comply with the national security laws. We had to comply with the PCT Treaty Act. We had to comply with the under the PCT Treaty Act, not only for this country, but other countries who said and request under the PCT Treaty Act, this technology must be protected to our country at all costs. So you see, we're faced with the same problems. So it became imperative that we be protected. Here we're now taking the liberated combustible gas atoms, and we're now going to destabilize it. We're going to take the combustible gas atoms into subcritical state. Now, how much energy does it take to trigger a thermonuclear device? Anybody know? Just about that much energy. All they do is take a subcritical mass here, subcritical mass here, put it here, and it goes into critical state. Now, in the contemplation of this, how can I tap into this enormous energy source and contemplate it? And the Lord said to me and asked me the question, what would happen if you would prevent the water molecule from forming during thermal gas ignition? You see, we looked at the gas combustion process all of our lives. What we didn't understand or would not understand or we would not perceive long enough to say what really is happening in releasing that energy. Now, if I light the hydrogen and oxygen gases and I prevent the water molecule from forming, normally the hydrogen and oxygen atom comes together, is releasing energy, is it not? But when the water molecules form, then energy stops. Is it not so? All right? But if I would prevent stability from occurring, what would take place? Well, Lord, one of two things will occur. Energy would continue to re-release until another atom structure is formed, or an implosion effect would occur and release pure energy. But you see, now, during the time, when I was in Washington, D.C. in 1965, the government called in the experts to come up with a fail-safe nuclear power system. In 3 days in the meeting, I got up in the meeting, and unfortunately, I wasn't really right with the Lord at the time. And I said, gentlemen, everything you said is a bunch of BS. There's no substance on the face of this earth that's subject to the hostile environment of nuclear radiation, uraniums 238s and 235s. You're going to have the hourglass effect occur. And my prophecy and said longevity is roughly 15 years came true on the 3 Mile Island. Now, we have a worse problem. We talked about, Chernobyl. Are you aware of it in the book of Revelation? It says the wormwood will make the waters bitter and many would die. The Russian word Chernobyl means wormwood. It's a small little bitter root plant that goes over in the valley in Russia. And they always talk about the radiation going in the atmosphere. They went over to North Sweden where they had to kill all of their animals and reindeer. But they don't talk about that in the meltdown it's gone down on the water table. And the water table is continually reacting and being exposed to radiation. Are you aware of that? And now hundreds and thousands and millions of Europeans that are going to be exposed to the radiation of the water table, dumping into the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, are now going to die of cancer being exposed to high radiation. But we got an even worse problem than that. Are you aware of that the reaction is still occurring? All they did was put concrete on top of it and put a little bit of other chemicals on top of it, but it's still in a reaction. If it goes into supernova, when the atomic mass starts to increase, it starts setting up the resonance. You start getting the high resonant pulse frequency, and if it interacts with the electromagnetic field strength of the Earth, if it reacts with the energy grid system of the Earth, guess what you're going to have? You're going to have a secondary explosion. It'll probably create a crater of about 5 miles across in diameter, about 4 miles deep, and that type of an explosion, it will possibly deflect the Van Allen belts, which in turn now would flip the Earth. We're on 22.5 degree axis. And if that type of explosion will occur, I will assure you, you'll come out with an electromagnetic pulse wave that will hit every nuclear power plant across Western Europe. And you're going to have a triggering system of all these nuclear power plants are going to start triggering right down the line, because you see, their electronic control systems are not set up to handle a very high intense magnetic pulse wave. And look at France, of all the nuclear plants that they have in existence. You think we don't have a problem that's confronting us? But how do we do it safely? Scientists ran to say, okay, we'll go to nuclear fusion. And so Livermore Laboratory comes up and says, we will expose the hydrogen atom to a high temperature around 10 million degrees. We will be able to subject it to tremendous pressure, and we'll squeeze the hydrogen nuclei to form helium and release energy and release it safely. We'll try to duplicate the sun, but learn to ask the right question. 1/3 of the sun is composed of oxygen atoms. Atoms have intelligence like you and I have intelligence, and animals have intelligence. And once you start to understand that, you can start to stimulate and have the atoms reacting in a certain way. Do you know that there's a unique atom that has the intelligence to be able to release thermal explosive energy more than any other atom on Earth? What is it? It's called the oxygen atom, is it not? Can you have a combustion process without the oxygen atom? It releases thermal explosive energy from other atoms. 1/3 of the sun is composed of oxygen atoms. Scientists don't want to consider the full elements of what's taking place in the sun. Another process that they came up with, and they demonstrated very successful in the university, called the muon process. Anyone ever heard of that? Well, the muon process, you got the hydrogen nuclei, you got the electron here, right? And so what they do is they took a muon, which was twice the mass size of the electron, which had a characteristic of that, to trick the hydrogen atom to accept the muon, and then get the hydrogen atom to eject its natural electron. And once that occurred, then the muon decays in a billionth of a second. And when it decays, under Einstein's equation, energy equals mass times the square of length, it says whenever you decrease mass, energy yield's increased. So when that muon decays, it decreases the mass of the hydrogen atom, does it not? And that energy that's in the nucleus to maintain the orbital velocity of that electron says, under the law of physics, I must what? Stabilize, is it not so? And therefore it releases energy, enormous amounts of energy, and releases it safely. But it's a Cadillac idea. It takes billions of dollars to try to come up with a muon generator to sustain and propagate the system, where you see the muon decays in a billionth of a second. But it was very well demonstrated very successfully in the universities of this country. Now, in the interim period of time in developing the technology, you know, the United States government took a group of scientists out in the Midwest. I don't know if you remember that. Gave them $1 billion, $2 billion or so, and said, come up with an answer to the energy problem. The Lord took me down to $3 in my pocket and said, by faith, you're going to put an energy system in the country. I said, oh yes, Lord. Recently, the scientists wrote a letter to Congress and informed Congress and said, well, we spent your money, but we don't have an answer to the energy problem. Well, don't worry about it. A little man down in Grove City, Ohio, started out with $3 in his pocket by faith and has a very viable answer to the energy problem. So, sometimes the Lord will confound the wise in order to be able to try to bring technology forward. We see there's a lot of efforts to try to bring and stop this type of technology from getting out in the marketplace. Go ahead. In order to do this, we now develop what we call a hydrogen gun technology, or a gas resonant cavity. We're now introducing laser energy into the system. We do not need high energy lasers to accomplish the task. We are using solid state lasers. Those are actually LEDs. If anyone knows about LEDs, do they not in a discrete amount of light frequency? Are they not a solid state laser? And as a result, if you put them together, you can come up with the laser intensity and pulse them in such a way that you're now co-equaling or maximizing the absorption of photon energy into the process. Go ahead, as we're exposing to high voltage. Go ahead. To do this, we now develop the electron extraction circuit. This is where we're taking the liberated electrons and we're now taking it out of the resonant cavity. If I set up an alternate pulse here, for an example, and these negative charge electrons now, if I would apply a positive voltage field potential here, would not the negative charge electrons go along this wire, interact with the filament of this light bulb to produce heat energy from light energy? Am I defining the laws of physics? No. If I apply a high voltage pulse to it, those liberated electrons can be taken right out of the resonant cavity. So as these negative charge electrons are going down the wire, have I not complied with the definition of producing electricity? Is not electricity defined as moving electrons down a wire? So the byproduct of the hydrogen fracturing technology to prevent the formation of water molecule from forming during thermal gas ignition, guess what? Is electricity. Now isn't that amazing? It becomes a self-sustained oscillation system. Go ahead. All right, now we got another problem here. There's another uniqueness. You know, Einstein said that if you extend your hands in opposite direction, somewhere along the line your hands are going to meet. Saying that our universe is circular in nature, is it not? Mm-hmm. The red effect in astronomy shows that our galaxy is expanding at an alarming rate, is it not so? In order for our galaxies to expand, mass must be created, right? How is it that you can take a seed of a plant, a little seed, and plant it in the ground, and that seed grows a tree? And it manufactures atoms, and it manufactures molecules, and it manufactures chemical processes, and to sustain life. How is it that that little seed can create mass in the atoms and the molecules? You ever thought about that? You know, normally in the scripture it says the energy comes from the throne of God day and night. So the energy coming into the third dimension is in the form of light energy. And imagine that this is going through an optical fiber optics, and the light energy has a native intelligence on it. And so as it goes down to the third dimension, it now starts the vortex. See, the light energy has intelligence from God. And so the vortexing now occurs, and as it absolutely occurs, guess what? Photon energy is now developed, is it not? And for photon energy, the photon energy now groups together to form the electron. And now when it forms electrons, it now goes ahead and forms protons. And then the protons go ahead and forms molecules, and the molecules now form chemical processes. And now the chemical processes sustains life as we know it. We talk about ether energy, do we not? How about vacuum energy? We say that in an atom, here's the nucleus and here's the electron, and somewhere along in that area there, if we build and devise a detector, we can use that energy source, can we not? Is that what this conference is all about? How can we tap into this energy source? It's an enormous amount of energy. Wheeler in 1979, I believe, at Princeton University, got a magnetic flux density around 10 to the 93rd power, showing and demonstrating that in fact there is no more question of vacuum energy. It's there. But how do you tap into it? How can you utilize it safely? How can you be able to do it in a way that you can maintain the economies of the world? Well, now to understand this a little bit further, under the law of physics says everything must reach a stable state. Is that not so? Mm-hmm. Right? If I take an atom, a black box that's not exposed to third dimensional stimuli like photon energy from the sun, somewhere along the line that atom's got to reach stable state. Is it not so? Now that would mean is that somewhere along the line that electron velocity would have to be remain at a constant velocity. Is that not so? Sure. And that constant velocity of the electron says that that atom would reach and maintain in a stable state. But that's illogical. Uh-oh, watch out, Stan. That's illogical. Does not that atom have mass?
Yeah.
Is it not 1/1840th the size of the proton? Mm-hmm. Does it have an electrical charge?
Yep.
Does it exhibit an electromagnetic field? Mm-hmm. Does it move to an electric static field? All of those force factors says that the velocity of that electron would eventually slow down in orbital velocity and attach itself to the surface of the proton. Mm-hmm. Come on, physicists. You know that there are force factors that's opposed to moving that electron. But under the law of physics says it reached stable state. The velocity, the orbital velocity of the electron is constant. How is it then that that electron, which is true, remains at a constant velocity? But the force factor says, no, I'm opposing the movement of that electron. Energy has got to come into that atom somehow to maintain the orbital velocity of that electron. Is it not so?
Right.
Now, just as our eyes had the abilities to see energy frequencies, which we call light energy, or energy by which we see, does not say that there's not other energy sources that are present. Did we not invent the ultraviolet lens and the infrared lens to detect those frequencies of existence? Just as we have done that, the atom has the abilities to detect energy coming in to the third dimension in order to maintain it. And we call it ether energy, or we call it vacuum space energy, or we call it universal energy coming from the throne of God. Now, the law of physics, we go down in the nucleus and we say the smallest particle inside the nucleus are what? Quarks, right? And we, well, and so.
Well, some
And then
people
they,
say that.
yeah, okay. So we got quarks. Then they say, well, what's holding the quarks together? Well, we got gluons. Well, what the heck is gluons? They're energy pathways. They are what's maintaining the orbital spin of the nucleus of the atom. Go ahead. We go back to the gyroscopic action of the nucleus of the atom. You know, when you put electrical stress on here, it now translates electrical stress to these orbital particles inside the nucleus, and as a result, just as the forces are opposing the movement of the electron, I'm now using voltage to slow down the movement of that electron, and I'm not. And as I'm deflecting the electron and changing the temperature rate of the electron, as I'm moving it and slowing it down, am I not now starting to slow down the gyroscopic action within the nucleus? Is that an abnormal condition? Is that not a destabilized condition? And just as the opposition to move that electron and keep it at constant velocity, I'm now using voltage to oppose the movement of the electron. And as the gyroscopic spin within the nucleus, the 100 particles or so, slows down in orbital velocity, then it opens up the energy aperture and allows the energy to come into the atom. Now that energy aperture in vision is just much like that of a black hole in space. Where a black hole is vortexing, is now allowing energy transfer from one dimensional time zone to that of another. There's no secret to it. All you have to do is understand the triggering process, the native intelligence of the combustible gas atoms to get it accomplished. How is it that you can get energy and release it in the gas combustion process? Where's the energy coming from? You know, when I presented this to 79 of the lead scientists of the world in Geneva, and when they realized that we were doing voltage, guess what the questioner was asking? Where's the energy coming from? We assume it was being consumed or absorbed from the electron, but you're restricting the electron. Where's the energy coming from? Well, scientists of the world and presented the elite physicists of China and the rest of them there, it's coming from the throne of God. It's coming in the third dimension. It's coming through the nucleus of the atom. And then the energy is now being transferring out to the electron level and allowing the electrons to go to a higher energy state, K, L, M, and N, and O orbits. Go ahead. Ah, boy. Lord, you're really doing something good. You see, we got to release this high energy in such a way that we don't have gamma radiations. That we don't have harmful radiations. But we're duplicating the same energy release as the combustible gas atoms are normally, but we're just setting up a condition to not allow the hydrogen and oxygen atom to completely form in a water molecule, to allow this energy to be released. Now, by exposing the combustible gas atoms to a high voltage, you're restricting amps. Now, you're not allowing amp flow to go into the process. Remember, we're restricting it. Therefore, we're using the voltage, opposite voltage potential, and when you put the electrical stress from the electrons transferring in to the nucleus, you're now oscillating the energy aperture. You are now bringing it into a non-stable state, and what happens is that when you apply this opposite voltage potential, you're oscillating the energy aperture, and the energy coming in the third dimension, it says to the atom, I need this additional energy, and it comes in. Now when you terminate that voltage, the aperture closes, and it's a one-way valve. And you know the potential of energy coming in is greater than the third dimension. Now, to tell you a little bit more about the existence of this, you know, an electron...
No time for discussion.
You've got about 5 minutes.
12 minutes.
2 minutes.
Oh my. Oh boy.
No time for discussion. I wish to pose
Okay.
questions.
What we're doing now is oscillating the energy aperture. It's a one-way valve. It's allowed to come in. To a nuclear device, you can take an electron, you can run it through a resistor, you release an X amount of heat. The proton is 1,840 times greater in size than that of the electron, so that energy going through destroying the proton or taking the energy from it is 1,840 times greater. So normally there's not enough energy in 1 cubic foot of mass to blow up anything. Basically what happens is the uranium's 238s and 235s, they group the protons together to form the vortexing of the energy, and when they detonate it and bring it into critical state, all they're doing is ripping open the energy aperture and allowing the flood of energy to come in. Another way to prove this out, ask the question of how energy is really being developed through the lightning. When lightning is, a bolt of lightning is going through
the sky, across the sky. Go ahead. All right, now we're doing the same thing with the oxygen atom.
Let's discuss a little bit the technical side of your invention. We are interested in the technical side.
Well, that's what I'm doing. So if you be quiet, I'll go on. Otherwise, you can leave, and then I'll go on. Right. So now we're exposing the combustible gases as well as the oxygen atom. We are now priming the combustible gas atoms to a very high energy state. Go ahead. Prior to gas ignition. Go ahead. Now this is an example of that we're adding photon energy to the process. We're now priming it by the energy process, universal energy. We're now causing it, plucking off the electron. So we're taking the combustible gas atoms now in a very high critical state, which now we're priming it, we're setting the condition, we're processing hydrogen oxygen atoms, and we're now going to trigger it. It's a triggering process. Go ahead. And now we've set the condition on the hydrogen fracturing process. So just the same thing as we had on the muon process. Note that on the muon process, we were plucking the electron. You remember? Mm-hmm. This was ejecting its natural electron. We went to a muon, as you see here, and it decayed. And therefore, we decrease mass, energy equals mass times the square of light. We decrease it and allow energy yield to increase. Now, what are we doing here? All of a sudden, we plucked off 4 electrons of the oxygen atom. We have added laser energy to it to prevent the atom, the oxygen atom, to go back from stable state. Is that a normal state?
No.
No. Therefore, we're now exposed to hydrogen atom to photon energy. And what happens is that when it absorbs it, it causes the electron to migrate farther away from its nucleus. As a result, is not the electrical attraction force between the electron and the nucleus weakened. So therefore, the hydrogen atom is weakened. So he and I go out on the basketball court. He's the hydrogen atom, and I'm the big oxygen atom, and I zap him with laser energy. Zap. Now he's in a weakened state. You see his electrons migrated farther away from his nucleus. Now, I'm the big gigantic oxygen atom, right? I'm 8 times bigger than you. But I have 4 missing electrons. And you don't like us. And so you ignite the gas, and you come to me to stabilize. And your basketball is electron, and I need to stabilize in the process. And when that happens, all of a sudden I see your electron, and I latch on your electron because I want to stabilize. And so my positive charged protons react on your positive charged nuclei. And when I latch on your electron, who's going to win out? Me or him? I'm going to win. Now when I pluck his electron, are you any more a hydrogen atom? No. He's a measly little proton. And all that energy stored in there with the electron, you've got to start to release that energy. And so this hydrogen atom starts to release its energy, but it's still not in a stable state. And now it goes into an impulse effect, or mass density increases. An avalanche effect occurs because it can't stabilize in the water molecule and starts to release this enormous amounts of energy. Go ahead. Bear with me the next 5 minutes or so I can do this. Now, how do we system engineer it into production? Okay, now we're taking the water, we're taking the ionized gases, we're taking the non-combustible gases. We are now producing a fuel mixture and now exposing it to a high pulse voltage frequency to release its thermal explosive energy, as we talked about.
Right now, so you might wrap it up in 1 minute. We got somebody else in the lecture here.
Oh my. Okay. Well, I guess we'll go on a little further. Those who are interested, if we can get another room or something, we'll go on to the final stages of this to show how we're taking it into the engineering stage. Thank you.